today. This is a reference architecture he's been continuing to develop and share with the community, and he's going to be on hand to walk you guys through this. We encourage lots of questions. We want everybody to have a great experience learning from this today. Thank you all for joining.
Yeah, thank you. So last time I was on here, we walked through deploying a .NET app on Elastic BeanStalk through a self-service pipeline. We're going to be doing something similar, but with a couple changes. So this time we still are using Service Catalog. We have our pipeline that is going to be self-service through that. But this time we're going to be deploying a .NET Core application onto ECS FarGate. So we've got the code pipeline is going to look very similar, but its target will be the FarGate container service and then .NET Core. So we've got a sample application and then the reference architecture, which I'm going to put this is the first link that we need in there. This is what we're going to be running through, and we just recently released a YouTube video on this ECS reference architecture. It's running through a sample Python application. So this particular walkthrough, we're going to be doing that .NET Core, slightly different flavor. But you can see how easy it is to move some of these applications around between the Elastic BeanStalk and ECS FarGate, or even Lambda and EC2 if you want. All right, so let's dive into this. I guess the first thing we should do, I've got Event Engine. If you're familiar with AWS's Event Engine, we've got that set up. So if anyone would like to follow along hands-on, I don't know, does Zoom have a raise your hand option? What we can do is we've got a hash here, and let's see here. How does this? I don't know if anyone can see this from earlier in the message. I'm going to repost it here. So that last URL, that dashboard eventengine.run, and then that hash, it'll ask you for a hash there. If you go ahead and paste that in there, that should randomly give you a team to sign into, and then once you're on there, you should be able to go to AWS Console, and do make sure that you get signed out of the console. It'll the AWS Management Console likes to redirect you back to where you were last, and in this particular case, we need to do that. Make sure we sign out, and then go back and open up the console again from that dashboard. So if anyone is wondering how to do that, let's see here. I can go ahead and just share my screen. Let's share this screen here. There we go. And let's stop the video. Okay, great. So hopefully everyone can see my screen now. With the team dashboard pulled up. So once you log in, you should be able to go over to that AWS console, hit open console, and that'll pull you up here. I've already done the sign out part of it. And I've got the reference architecture here with ECS, the ECS section. So you can see here what we're going to deploy. We've got a code pipeline section, which is the version control, check everything in. I think last time we ran this, some of you figured out how to connect this with your VS Code or Visual Studio, so that's definitely possible. At the end of this, we're going to have a container registry with an image in there. So we're going to take that image of our .NET Core, just a sample application, and we're going to provision a service that runs on our FarGate cluster that will ultimately push our container image out to the internet. So all three of these are separate products inside of Service Catalog. So the idea here is we're enabling our developers by giving them the tools they need to check in code and then run it on AWS without them needing to know a whole lot about how AWS works. So this is, we get into that ITSM or governance and management of cloud systems. This is that self-provisioning, the predefined immutable templates. Ideally, you've taken these templates and run them through your security team, your cloud center of excellence, and you're now giving them out for self-service to your developers. So if you are signed into the console here, at this point, let's see here, you should be able to go to Cloudformation. This is a clean account, so there's nothing in there. Let me pause there. I'll check the chat, or if anyone wants to speak up. Nope, don't leave the meeting. Let's see here, where'd my chat go? There's the chat. Is anyone having problems signing in? Anybody need help with the console? You could also do this. Everything we're doing today will be easily taken down through, everything's launched through Cloudformation, so we can remove everything through Cloudformation as well. There's one little piece where you got to empty out the S3 bucket before you can clear it out, but removing everything should be a pretty easy task, and we can run through that if anyone wants. But right now, just seeing silence, we'll just move on and assume that everybody's doing okay here. So if we're in here, we're in this reference architecture, we go down here, let's launch this stack. And that will take us to the Cloudformation template here. And we've got this URL, we're good to go. We'll go next. If you're coming in through Event Engine, you are signed in as this team role. And we want to add that down here to this linked role 1. And that just gives us access to the service catalog portfolio without needing to change roles. If you're logged in as something else, you want to make sure that you give your, you put your role in there, whatever you're logged in as, if you're doing this on your own account. And you can leave everything else alone. So we're going to hit next. There's another next button. Scroll all the way down. Make sure that we check these blue check boxes and go ahead and create that stack. So this is running now on your Cloudformation. It's going to spawn a few other stacks here. So if you look at the, if you check the nested stack box, you can see everything that it's spinning up. And that'll take just a minute here. If anyone's got any questions or comments, just watch that spin up for just a minute here. I guess while we're doing that, I can show you the sample application we've got is from this repo here, which runs through. This is also a this is also the stuff, the GitHub repo that's backing a blog, which is out there. I can find that link in a little bit. But they're in here, they're going through all of the details on how to do this. And then they're also using a Nginx container with Docker Compose to create a larger structure. So with what we're going to run through today is a simplified version of that. And then a lot of the setup in here is handled already by the templates in Service Catalog. So that's the other thing that's going is we don't need to worry about a lot of the setup that they run through. I'm going to post this in the chat window if you want to see that, just to have that as reference. It's a good sample application in here. This My MVC Web is the .NET Core. This is what we'll be using today to as our sample .NET Core application. So hopefully I've talked long enough that we're up and running. Great. Okay, so at this point, we've got everything running in our Service Catalog. So we've deployed this out. We've done the admin functionality of creating the templates, getting them out there to our people, right? So at this point, we're going to switch over to the end user point of view. And to do that, I'm going to go over to Service Catalog. And if you don't already have it in the window like I do, you can just type in catalog, pop over here, And it will drop us into the administrative section initially. So we want to go over here to products. And we'll notice that we've got a few things in here to see. So this is all of those basic products we were looking at earlier in this diagram. I'll try to reference back to this so we know what we're looking at. ECS. So here we've got a code pipeline product, a service product, and a cluster product. So if we go back to service catalog, we can see all of those. We've got the service. There's a couple extra products in here as well, the code pipeline and the cluster. So let's go ahead and we'll just start with the cluster because that takes a little bit of time to spin up. So we can just go ahead and launch that for right now. And it can kind of run in the background while we do these other setup steps. So the cluster doesn't require any knowledge from the user. The only thing you got to do is give it a name, which it's automatically generated for us. So we can just go ahead and launch that. Then we'll go back to our products. The next thing we need is our code pipeline project. So we've got this code pipeline project here. We're going to check on that, or we can just click on the name and it'll take us in to a view here. So this is a cool part about Service Catalog. If you're not familiar with self-service through AWS, the Service Catalog UI here gives you a support link, some email contacts, who it is, some description. So if you had an internal wiki, for example, that helped explain what these products were and how to use them, who owns them, you can set all this stuff up. All of that is covered in the reference architecture in other areas. I'm just showing you right now what that looks like as an end result once you have it all set up. So with this, we're going to go down here, or go up here, sorry, to the launch product. I'm going to get rid of this note there. And now we're launching this container pipeline project, and we're going to give this a name. We'll just call this .NET Core. I'm just going to, you don't have to, but I'm going to give the repo name the same thing, .NET Core. We can go down here. So all we're doing, we're creating this whole DevOps pipeline, and all we're asking our user to do is give it a name. So again, we're architecting with that end user in mind. We've got a lot of complex functionality. We've got code pipeline, code build, we've got containers, we've got some S3 buckets and an ECR, the Container Registry. All of that's being created here, but all we asked the user to do was name it. So now that is running in the background. We can see it's under change. And if we want, we can switch over to the admin view here and just go into Cloudformation. We can see all of this running in the background as well. So we see that not only is our container pipeline running, but it's also provisioning that FarGate cluster stack. I'm going to turn off the nested. There we go. So both of those are running for us in the background. And we can just chill out for a minute while those are provisioning.
Programming note, some of you might want to check the chat. There might be a private message from me about some Uber Eats possibly.
Oh, nice. There we go. Get some lunch while we're sitting here. Yeah, we can see in here. Okay, so at this point, our pipeline project has spun up and the FarGate cluster is still running in the background. So now that we have the pipeline project, I'm going to use that Cloud9 IDE and just to show you all of this can be integrated to a web-only version. I'm sure most people would prefer to use VS Code or Visual Studio, something like that, but I'm going to show you from the Cloud9 perspective. The other reason I like Cloud9 is because the credentials are already handled. So I can check stuff into the code commit repo. I don't need to worry about SSH keys or credentials or anything like that. If you do want to do that, there's documentation out there I can point you to on how to set those credentials up. You would need to go into IAM and generate a key for yourself, or if you're using the HTTPS, you would need to generate credentials in IAM for that. Which, if there's questions about that, we can cover that in a minute. For right now, I'm in order to launch that Cloud9 IDE, I need this clone URL HTTP link here. So I'm going to copy that link. I'm going to go back to my products here. I'm going to find my Cloud9 IDE, and I'm going to launch that. And this is going to ask me a few things. We can leave all these by default if you want to give it a name, if you want to change the instance type, and then shut it down after an hour of inactivity. But right here is where we need that path. So we're going to put this, the local path is going to be the .NET Core, and then the actual repo URL will be this right here. So I'm going to go down here and launch the product. So again, we just launched an EC2 instance with Cloud9 running in it. And again, I just want to keep calling out on this self-service thing that we didn't need to know anything about VPCs or EC2 or any of that stuff. I gave them the EC2 sizes there. Another common theme is to do what we call t-shirt sizing. So if we go back here and we look at this Cloud9 IDE, just look at those parameters. What a lot of people will do is map, say, this instance type. They'll just map that, instead of giving them the T2 micro or medium, just small, medium, and large, and then map that to the instance and whatever other details they want. And then you could, of course, just take some of these options away from your end users altogether if you want. We're going to go back to service catalog, provisioned products. So we can see we've got a number of things running here. And, oh, our cluster is now up and running. That's great. And our IDE is provisioning. So I'm going to hop into this cluster and run through what all that created here. If we go down here to this, so let me walk you through all this real quick. I realized I'm clicking on things and not telling people what I'm doing. So I'm in the provisioned product. So this is stuff that this user has created within Service Catalog. I'm going into this FarGate cluster here, and down under the events, there's this record ID, which is the initial provisioning, and we can see that it's succeeded. And this gives us all of our outputs. So again, back to this concept of provision or architecting with the end user in mind, you need to give the end user all of the pieces that they need to be able to use these products together. So in this particular one, we've got a lot of different things. We've got a cluster name. We've created a load balancer. We've created a couple VPCs, some security groups, and we've got some network routing to go from a public to a private subnet, so that we can do a lot of that security involved stuff, right? We don't want to just expose our private subnet and our private stack to the world. We want to be able to go through the load balancer, and ideally you'd probably put some security, even a web application firewall in between there. So let's see here. Let's go down. This external URL is what we're going to come back to in a little bit. This is the external facing side of this load balancer. And for now, we're just using HTTP because we don't have the certificate and everything set up. If you were doing this, obviously, for production, you'd go ahead and bake that into the template. And then here's our private and public subnets. We've got a couple of those to span our availability zones, which really makes this a high availability setup. And we'll dive into that a little bit more once we have our application running up on FarGate. But I wanted to show you, so right now, as we would expect, this cluster is not running because there's no, went to HTTPS. It's there's nothing running there. So we'll come back to that in a little bit once we actually have something running on our cluster. Let's go back in here, see if our Cloud9, yes, Cloud9 is now available. So we're going to go into that provisioned product. We see our status is flagged over to available. We'll go down here to our record. And the output on this is, again, what we need to run it. So it's the URL to our Cloud9 instance. So I'm just going to go ahead and open that. Get a drink of water. All right. So when our Cloud9 instance comes up initially, we linked it to a GitHub repo, if you recall. And then it also brings in the reference architecture repo for just in case we need to move stuff back and forth. So it brought in, here's our new code commit repo that was created when we created that pipeline project. Of course, it's empty right now. And it brought in the service catalog reference architecture. So for this, what we want to do, I've got a sample application put together for us. And we want to just go ahead and download that. And I'll post this into the chat. Let's see here. That chat, there it is. Chat window keeps running away from me. So there's that wget command. We're just going to pull that down, and then if we look in here, we've got our .NET Core. So, got the same name. Let's see how bad this is if we just unzip it. There we go. That worked. Okay, great. So this comes in, we've got our sample application, we've got our, again, we're releasing this as a container, so we've got a sample Docker file. This is really simple. We're just, we're giving it the environment, and then we're copying our output from our build to the Docker image, right? So then the other folder that's different here is we've got this code pipeline folder, which is going to interact with our code pipeline that was created as part of that code pipeline project. And we've got 3 steps in there. We've got a build, a validate, and a deploy. And these are, again, just really bare bones files in here to get you started on this. Everybody's going to have their own unique publish and build commands. But just to get you started, we've got some sample stuff. We're just grabbing the latest .NET for this container. We're calling .NET publish, and we're sending it to out. Then I just did a list on that out folder. So then if we go to validate, if you have any unit tests and you're using the .NET test, then we can call that here. This particular project does not have unit tests, but I wanted to show you a stage in case you are doing unit test, which is a big part of the whole DevOps and CI/CD process you should be testing. So it'll call .NET test on that release. And then finally, this is where the meat of it is the actual deploy. So what we're doing here is we're signing into our ECR, and then we're building our Docker image, and then we're tagging it with a couple things. We're tagging it with the latest build number and then the latest tag, okay? Which all of these values here are controlled by code pipeline and also our code, the code pipeline project that we ultimately loaded into, or initially loaded into Service Catalog. And all of those templates are available if you want to go through them on the GitHub repo. If we get through this fast enough, I think we can take some questions and dive into the Cloudformation that's building all of this. So hopefully we're able to get into that. And then at the end here, we are pushing that image up to our ECR, that container registry in AWS on our account. And then finally, once we have everything running and we have that container, we're going to then provision a service, again through Service Catalog. Once we have that service, we can come back here into our build spec, and we can give it that service name and the cluster name, and we can force a deployment. So what that's going to do is in our FarGate service, it's going to spin up a new task with the newest container definition in it, and then it's going to drain the old one. So we get that zero downtime handoff between our image versions, which is really cool to see. So hopefully we'll have time to be able to run through all of that today. But right now what we've got our sample application in here. I expanded everything. So if we go into our .NET Core, we can go do a git status. Everything's new. So we're going to go ahead and add everything in there. Do our first commit. And then we're going to push that up to our code commit repo. Great. So at this point, what we can do is go and watch this happen on Code Pipeline, which hopefully behaves for us. Sometimes it can take a while sometimes for these containers to spin up. Okay, so now we're diving into a bit more of what was created by that first code pipeline project. And one of the main things in there is the code pipeline itself. So if we go into this pipeline, we'll see that we've got our initial commit. So this is the code commit, which you just noticed that I did that check-in. So it's got a new version. And then it's going to start pushing this through, right? So here's that build, here's that validation, and then here's the deploy stage. If any one of these fails, it's going to fail. It's going to give you the alert, and it'll give you the logs to show you what happened. And again, just to tie you back together with what's going on, if we go back to our Cloud9 IDE, each of those stages is handled by one of these files. So the build stage, obviously the build file, the deploy, or sorry, then the second one is that validation, and then the final one is that deploy. So we can see all of those running out right here. And then if you like watching log files go by while it's in progress, we can switch over to code build itself, and we can see the log. So it's already completed while I was talking, which is great. So we can see in here that we loaded .NET Core, did a list real quick, and then we went ahead and ran the .NET publish command, which we can see the output of that. And then we did a list on that out folder. So ultimately, this is our application that will get moved over to our container, right? So we have all of that fun stuff. Then we can go back to our validation. So it's running the test, which this one's kind of a moot issue right now because there is no unit test, but you can see it run the command nonetheless. I might as well leave that up and running. We can see it go by. So right now, if we go into this details here, we can see that it's spinning up that container, and now it's actually doing something. We should see logs start to populate. So we got another list there, and then we've got our .NET test. So again, if this were to fail, this stage would fail, and then it would not continue, right? And that's pretty standard with most CI/CD pipelines. You don't want to continue the process if you get a failure at any of these stages. So that should go through and succeed, and then that'll take us to our deploy. All right, deploy got picked up. This is always the fun part, just the waiting. There we go. So we've logged in. Again, just to point out, so behind the scenes, we've created a number of IAM roles, and then we've bound all those roles together so that our pipeline has very narrowly scoped permissions to interact with things. But then what it does need to do, it has that ability. So it's got permission to log in. It's got permission to push things to ECR. And it's got permission to manipulate these files along the way. And this is all, again, handled in that Cloudformation template, and it's transparent to the end user. The end user didn't have to know any of that stuff ahead of time. And in fact, this is one of the best parts about Service Catalog, I think, is that the end user does not have to be given the permissions to be able to do any of this. So the end user permissions on this are very lightweight. In fact, we have some companies that lock people down from everything except Service Catalog. And then what you do is you give Service Catalog, the service itself, the permissions to do things like create endpoints, create VPCs, create new containers and all that stuff, so that your end users, you don't really have to worry about them doing, and it's not always nefarious things. It's kind of, maybe it's just things they don't know what they're doing, right? And they accidentally spin up a cluster that's too big, or start chewing up a bare metal instance that's running at $2 an hour, right? So those types of things you can prevent by getting those well-architected templates to them in that predefined immutable fashion, and then abstracting all of this complexity away from them. So I think I have talked long enough. Yeah, we're getting into the build of the actual container now. Or we built it, we're tagging it, and now we're pushing it up to ECR. Which means what we can do is switch over to ECR at this point. Let's see here. We'll go over to our Docker Container Registry. And again, this registry was created by that initial product. And we've got our URI here. Let's see here. We should at this point have an image in there. We do. And it's tagged. It's tagged with that build number, and then it gives the most recent one the latest tag as well. And that latest tag is what we want. That's what we want when we create our service. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to grab this URI and go back to Service Catalog. Go back into our products, and we're going to provision that last product. And this is really that product that binds everything together. It's using the container image and the FarGate cluster to finally run our container. So I went in there, I found that ECS service, I clicked launch. Just going with the default container ports. Here's an example of that t-shirt sizing. So I've gone ahead and just mapped the container sizes, and so there's a few things in there. There's the container size itself, there's the image, and then there's the memory. And I've mapped all that to just some easily usable names that the user would understand: small, medium, and large. So I'm just going to start with a small container. Here's where that URI goes, and oh, I don't want one, I want latest. And then we're just going to give this a name, so we'll call this the .NET. Hey, there we go, .NET app. So we've given it our, let's go back to our image. So we've got latest, and we've got one. We've given it the URI, we've given it the latest tag, we've just given it a name, and we're using a small container on port 80. So we're going to go ahead and launch that. Now again, some of this your end users will need to know. For example, that end port, that container port, right? For this particular application or setup, I have gone ahead and made the container port and the load balancer port the same. you could set that differently. You could give the end user 2 options in there, or you could force them to use specific ports, however you want to do that. And we can dive into that in just a minute on where those are being set and how that looks. But it's also important to keep in mind that the Docker image itself is also controlling some of that. So we've set the port right here as well. So the end user will need to know a little bit about how their Docker container is running and what's being exposed. So if you were to, I think the default for the Kestrel app on .NET Core is 5,000. So you could change this to 5,000. And then in your load balancer side of things, you would have to remap that port and forward it from port 80 or port 443 over to that internal port 5000. But again, just for the sake of simplicity and for being able to launch this without going into all those details, we've just gone ahead and set everything to port 80. And that also makes it easier for the browser. We can click on that URL here in a minute and it'll show it to us. So we go back to our provision products. We look at our, somewhere here we've got our service right there. It's the top one. And oh, it's already available. Cool. So now what we should be able to do is go into our cluster and pull up that that external URL. And there we go. We see our sample .NET Core application that's running, which is great. So let's dive into a little bit of the behind the scenes, and then I'm going to make a change to this and check it in, and we should see the update happen. And then we can open it up for some questions and whatnot. So here we are on our repository. There's our image. If we head over here to clusters, we've got our cluster, which is running one service and one task. Let's go into that real quick. I'm actually going to grab this name because we need that for our update that we're about to do. We can see there's that .NET service that we created earlier, which is running a task, and all of this was again handled by those templates behind the scenes there. And then this is being load balanced from a private subnet to a public subnet through a application load balancer that's being pointed at this service. So we can go and look at that in just a minute as well. But first, let's go ahead and set it up so that we can do those updates that I was talking about, that zero downtime update. So we've got this line here. We can comment this out now, and we can add in our cluster name. So there's the cluster name. And then we also need the service name. I've already forgotten what that was. I think it was, yeah, .NET app. There we go. Where'd that go? .NET app. All right, so we'll save that file and we'll do a and then we'll push that out. There we go. And now we should be able to watch this go through the chain of events, and it will push out a new version. Oh, you know what? I should have made a change while we were in there. Let's go in there. Let's go into that home view and all right, we'll do hello BHM on there. Updated the index page, and we'll push that. So we got two pushes. We got to that'll create a couple versions. Seems to be running pretty quickly through the pipeline, so we'll see that all go through. And then we can see what's going on behind the scenes. We'll see that it'll add another task. It'll have 2 tasks running at the same time for a period of time, and then it's going to drain the old one and it'll be replaced with the new one. And then we'll see in our ECR here some new images pop up. So then the other thing, while that's all running through, I might as well show you what's running behind the scenes here on the load balancer side of things that was created. So if we go in here to EC2, we can go down to let's start with the load balancer. So we got 2 of these. We've got an internal and an external, and the external one's the one that's really relocating. Nope. And my UI just froze. Yeah. Let's start with the target group then. Okay, so there's that that forward to port 80, and then if we go down in here, we can see that it is being updated by our service, right? The service is is ultimately the target group on this, and we're doing that health check as well on that, which it's given us a IP address, but we can head over to the service and see what that looks like. So when we update this service, that's when it then goes and updates the target group. So if we head into here, go right here. Yep. Yeah, we can see the VPCs and the subnets that it's running on. Nope. I didn't want that. I wanted the task. Sorry, not the target group. Here's our task. And there's our IP address for that particular task, which has been registered as the target for this target group. And then hopefully this load balancer will load. Not sure why I can't see load balancers right now. But then that load balancer is just pointed at that target group. So let's see where our pipeline is at this point. Okay, it looks like we got a couple things. So we're running an update right now, and that second change set is coming through. So we should be able to see, got too many windows open. We should be able to see our second build come online here in just a second. There, okay. So we've seen that we've revved our version. We've now got a version 2, and we've gone ahead and labeled that latest tag. And we should also, since that's happening, we should be able to go into our cluster, and we should have a couple tasks running here at some point, depending on where, there it is, yep. So it's spinning up that new task now. So if we head back to our code pipeline, we can see that happening right here. Since we uncommented, we added that new deployment line. We go down here, here's the build, this is what we saw before, here's the push, and then here's that update for that service. And you can see the output from that, where it went ahead and forced a new deployment on the service. And that's what we're seeing right now. So we have 2 of them running, and eventually this older one here will get drained and dropped. And then since I checked in those two changes separately, we'll have to wait for a whole new deployment. So now it's redoing that deployment. It's going to get a little bit of a backlog here, and then we'll be able to go here eventually and see our updated website. So that's the run through. At this point, let's open it up to any questions that people might have. If we want, we can dive into the Cloudformation that's running this. Again, that's all located right here in the ECS section. So that entire pipeline that was built was this file right here. So I can dive into that some. The FarGate service is right here. The cluster itself is right here, which is actually based off of another GitHub repo. So if you want to see some more sample ECS templates, you can head to this this Cloudformation sample repo right there. But this is creating that all those internal, the private, the public. We go down here, you can see how the we were talking earlier about how those load balancers and the target groups work, so you can see some of that and what's going on there. And then the task definition itself is what's binding the service to the target group. So, you know, once you create the load balancer, then you need to create a target group and assign the assign that target group to the load balancer. So all that was being orchestrated by the combination of these templates. And again, I ran you through the end user's view of that. The end user didn't have to know any of that. They didn't even have to know that there was a VPC with private and public subnets. All they had to do was check in their code, give it a name, and then run the service. We can run into this right here. So this is the this creates the task definition. There's that container port and the size. This is something I like a lot. Again, you know, architecting with the end user in mind and mapping things that the user does understand to behind the scenes values. And you can see here it's mapping that to specific CPU and memory values, which a lot of people, you would expect a number like this to be for your memory, but not on the CPU side. So you have to understand a bit about how containers and FarGate are running in order to understand all these values. And we've gone ahead and just abstracted those away from our end users. They don't need to know any of that. All the logs are being pushed out to a log group by default. So again, this is something when we talk about management and governance, especially in the control tower world, we want all of those logs being piped not only out to CloudWatch, but we also want them being piped out to a secure location. Ideally, in the control tower environment, it's set up by default to go to this log account. So even if they find a way to mess around with the logs on their account, all those logs are still being pushed out to that audit account so that you have full transparency. You can see everything that's going on in all of your sub accounts. Then we've got this task definition here, and this is where we're getting that port mapping. There's our log group, right, that we just did. Here's our mapping to the CPU and the memory. And then just some image stuff. This was passed as one of the parameters coming in from the user. What was that actual image URI? And if we go down here, here is where we're binding to the load balancer. So we're creating that target group right here, and then we're updating that target group and then binding it to the load balancer. So all of that's handled for the end user. They didn't need to know about any of that. They just needed to set the port, and then the rest of it happens behind the scenes. Speaking of, I told you I was going to show you where that port gets set. So if we go into our FarGate, I was in the right file, I think. We want the FarGate service. So if you find this container port, we go down here, it's mapped in a couple different places. So first, the container definition itself is the container port, but then we go down here On the load balancer side of it, the container port is right there. But if we wanted to remap that to something else, we could go down here to the listener, and here we're just binding it to the container port, but we could actually forward that to a different port if we wanted to, right there. So maybe you could give the end user two options. One's the internal port and one's the external port. And then you can set up your listener, the public side of things, and you could forward it to a target group with a different port value if you wanted. Instead, what we've done here is we just made them all the same port for simplicity. Let's see here if I've talked at you long enough. We should have. Good, everything has stabilized. Let's go look at our code pipeline. If we go into, we don't need any of that anymore. Well, let's just go here. This should refresh and we should see our change at this point. Yeah, maybe not. Our change did not make it out. Let's go into, I don't know, we wanted the repository. Yeah, 3 is latest. Yeah, I thought we had that change in there. It must not have picked up on it, or I had too many running at the same time. Or knowing me, I edited the wrong file or something and didn't check it in correctly. Hello, BHM. There it is. All right. We'll go down here to our code pipeline. Maybe we just need to push this out one more time. Okay, so I'm going to let that run a bit. Any questions? Let's see here. Oh, great. All right, coming back to the screen. All right, so we got a question from Sergey. Let's see here. EC2, FarGate. Okay, so you came in where the Cloudformation were already created. Okay, so we had an event engine, and if you wanted, you could run it through. Let's see here. I'll post this again. So what we're doing is we're running through the reference architecture on this service catalog reference architecture, and we've got some sample areas in here. One of them is ECS. I will be updating this shortly. There's a YouTube video of this pipeline where we are demonstrating a Python container running. And then for this particular lab, we were running through a .NET Core application. But I'll go ahead and post this into the chat again so you can see. You can run this in your own account if you want. Obviously, there's going to be a little bit of a cost involved with that. But once you do get everything up and running, since it is through Cloudformation and Service Catalog, if you go into these provisioned products and you're done with it and you don't want to have any more cost, you can just go in here to any given any of the products, and you can go up here and you can just terminate them. So that'll clear it out. The one caveat to that is the code pipeline project itself. That has two pieces that you need to manually do. You need to go into the ECR and get rid of all these images, which I think what you can do, it's easier just to manually delete the whole repository instead of manually deleting each little image along the way. Then you also need to go into S3 and there will be a bucket created. In this particular case, it's the only bucket out there, but you can see this pipeline artifacts. So this is what code pipeline is using to move stuff around, and you just need to empty that bucket. So, and that's just a normal check on things, right? We got CloudFormation, which is really Service Catalog is a front end for CloudFormation. You can't delete buckets and repos. You can't delete entities when there's stuff still inside of them. So you have to empty them out and then you can delete them. But that's how you would go about clearing everything out. So you'd go into Service Catalog, you'd terminate all of your provisioned products, and then you'd go back to CloudFormation, which I already had that up. And there's a number of stacks. You should see all of these get deleted, and then you just go and you delete that portfolio stack, and then your account's cleaned up. Any other questions then? I was hoping to see this. Let's see here if that's going through or publishing. Maybe we'll see this update. I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong not to get the update in there. Oh, I just had to be patient. There we go. So if we go back to ECS. Oh, I'm in Ohio now. Let's go back to Virginia. Yeah, okay. That might have been, maybe I did need to do that last one. We'll see here. Yep, they're all running. Yep, so that's pretty much it, everyone. We ran through it. Got all the links out. There's the, I'll do the YouTube video one more time if you want that. And then check out the reference architecture just in general here. There's some good stuff. If you want the Elastic BeanStalk section that we went through last time, and we have a video on that and a blog on that now. I'm not sure if both of those were out last time or not. With that, very similar to this one, except the output is the BeanStalk. And then obviously we were in the ECS section. And then if you want to do this and you want to manage all of your infrastructure as code, and give your end users that self-service ability through Service Catalog, especially if you're working with Control Tower. This is a major thing that people are doing. Setting up these sandbox accounts, setting up the accounts in general with all of the logging, the security, the governance. We just came out with a whole suite of tools with Trend Micro that plugs right into Control Tower and the guardrails and everything. So this is a common thing that enterprises are doing to manage accounts in the entire AWS thing at scale. So then ideally what happens is your account, a new account spins up, the Service Catalog portfolio is already created for them. They have all of these tools ready to go. So they can just sign into that new account, check in their code, and they're up and running with whatever it is that they're doing. If it's containers or EC2 or Elastic BeanStalk, all of those products are there and ready for them when they sign in and just go over to Service Catalog. And then this process here is a DevOps pipeline to manage that infrastructure as code, so that you can manage all of that through the same process, check it in, validate it, and then publish it out to your end users, and then distribute it out to all of your accounts and regions. And then we've got some blogs and videos on here, and then how to share your portfolios out. And we're working on a number of videos and blogs that I think, so keep an eye on some of this. I think we should be getting some updates to this in the next couple of weeks as some more of this content comes rolling out. But that's it for me, unless there's any other questions.
That was awesome, Chris. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Purple in that display now.
It's all coming in clearly now.
Yeah.
So if that's it, everybody, we appreciate everybody coming. Really glad to see everybody here.